Artur Beterbiev says he prefers an undisputed unification against Dmitry Bivol next, rather than facing his mandatory challenger Anthony Yarde next. And I think most of us boxing fans feel the same way. Beterbiev said, unification fights are more interesting, more motivating. I prefer unification fight. I want to be undisputed. However, I'm not sure whether the undisputed fight is more realistic for Beterbiev's next bout than his mandatory fight against Anthony Yarde. I suspect the mandatory fight against Yarde is probably more realistic. I certainly hope I'm wrong because, again, for me, undisputed is priority here. Now, it's an interesting thing with Anthony Yarde because this is the second time he's been mandatory for the WBO light heavyweight title since 2019. Some of you guys may remember that he was mandatory for Sergey Kovalev. That fight went ahead in Russia. Anthony Yarde was stopped in the 11th round. Now, since that time, Anthony Yarde has fought a guy called Diego Ramirez. Yep, never heard of him. Dex Spellman. I mean, would you call him a journeyman? I don't think that's too far off the mark. Lyndon Arthur in the first fight, which Anthony Yarde lost. And how good is Lyndon Arthur? We really don't know. He hasn't fought anybody other than Anthony Yarde. Alex Theran, again, an absolute nobody. And then the Lyndon Arthur rematch where Yarde was able to avenge the defeat with a 4th round KO. So the question I have to ask you guys is, has Anthony Yarde really earned 2 mandatory shots from 2019 to now? The space of 3 years, has this guy earned 2 mandatory shots? When you look at the WBO light heavyweight rankings, there are people below Yarde who haven't been made mandatory, such as Gilberto Ramirez. Callum Smith, well, has he fought at light heavyweight yet? He might have had 1 fight. Callum Johnson, Joshua Buatsi, a veteran in Jean Pascal, several other people here, Uz Katigi and what have you. So again, the question is, has Anthony Yarde actually earned, compared to what the other people in the WBO top 15 have done, has he actually earned 2 mandatory shots in a space of 3 years? I suspect, this is my take on it, that this really speaks to the closeness of the relationship between Frank Warren and the WBO, which goes back several decades. I remember an interview with Frank Warren where he said that he helped the WBO during their early days in the early 90s, and they helped him because, of course, they gave his fighters shots for their titles. The Frank Warren promotional outfit, Queensbury, was really the home for WBO title fights for a long time. This was when the WBO wasn't recognized as a legitimate sanctioning body by the wider boxing establishment. So again, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but in my view, as an outsider looking in, the fact that Yarde has had 2 mandatory shots, basically he's become mandatory twice in the space of 3 years for the same belt, without really doing anything in between, you know, a victory over Lyndon Arthur, and then the rest are all puddings, right? And he actually lost to Lyndon Arthur in that time as well. So to me, this speaks to the closeness of the relationship between Warren and the WBO, rather than Anthony Yarde actually earning the position, because you could definitely argue that there are other people in the rankings who have done just as well as Yarde since 2019, if not better, maybe done more, deserve a mandatory shot more than he does. You could argue this. But anyway, Anthony Yarde is current, and nothing against Anthony Yarde, by the way. I'm just being objective here. Anthony Yarde is currently 22-2, 21 KOs, stopped once by Sergey Kovalev. The other loss was to Lyndon Arthur. He's looking to go in there against Artur Beterbiev and do what 18 other people couldn't do, which was beat the guy. Now, Anthony Yarde was present at Beterbiev's fight against Joe Smith Jr., and I watched some of the interviews that Yarde did after the fight, and I can't really argue with the stuff he was saying. I know some people are kind of misconstruing or taking it out of context or taking issue with some of the things that Anthony Yarde said. But I don't necessarily think that it was anything, out of hand or anything unrealistic, because basically when he was asked to compare Sergey Kovalev with Artur Beterbiev, he said that Kovalev's more of a sharpshooter. And I would agree with that. Kovalev is a guy who is a bit more wiry than Artur Beterbiev, a bit more rangy. That's the way he looks in the ring to me anyway. Beterbiev's a bit more compact. I know they're a similar height, but Beterbiev just looks more compact, arms maybe not quite as long, etc. And in terms of who has the bigger one-punch power, there was an opponent, a mutual opponent of Beterbiev and Kovalev. I'll show you here. Gabriel Campillo. And he said that Beterbiev hits harder than Kovalev. He said that Beterbiev is the hardest puncher he's ever faced in the ring, Gabriel Campillo. So that's what a mutual opponent says. I don't know whether Anthony Yarde believes that. Perhaps he's trying to convince himself that actually Kovalev hits harder, so he doesn't need to worry about Beterbiev's power. Obviously, he's going to respect it, but he doesn't need to worry about it. It's a different thing. So, yeah, he said that Kovalev's more of a sharpshooter. I probably agree. He said that Kovalev's maybe a bit faster in terms of hand speed and throws the straight shots, whereas Beterbiev likes hooks. Again, I tend to agree. I think Kovalev probably does have a little bit of hand speed on Beterbiev, at least at long range, and does prefer the straight shots, whereas Beterbiev likes hooks and uppercuts a little bit more. But Beterbiev's got good straight shots too. Yarde better not get that twisted. Okay, this guy can come right down the pipe and hit you with something as straight as an arrow. So, yeah, I don't have an issue with Yarde's assessment. And in terms of, again, the speed, Beterbiev isn't slow, but he doesn't dazzle you with quickness, for sure. But Anthony Yarde also said that Beterbiev is technical. He can box. And this is something I said before the Joe Smith Jr. fight, and obviously after the Joe Smith Jr. fight, we saw in that first round, as short as the fight was, we saw some boxing skills from Artur Beterbiev, setting Joe Smith Jr. up, walking him onto punches. This is not your typical pressure fighter who can only fight one way and only do one thing. No, Beterbiev's more versatile than that. Anthony Yarde acknowledges this. So he's going to need to be fantastically prepared, and they're apparently looking at the fight taking place in London sometime later on this year. There hasn't, according to Anthony Yarde, been any talk of step-aside money yet. And if you cast your minds back to that Sergey Kovalev fight, Kovalev's people apparently tried to pay Yarde step-aside money to allow the Canelo fight to happen before the mandatory defense against Yarde. And at the time, I was somebody who was in favor of Anthony Yarde stepping aside, allowing Kovalev to fight Canelo, because you're going to get your shot anyway. If Canelo wins, which he ended up doing, you're playing for even higher stakes. You get a shot against Canelo rather than against Sergey Kovalev, who, even though he was a champion and even though he was a well-known fighter, not on the level of Canelo Alvarez. And if Canelo had vacated the way that he did, right, after beating Kovalev, then Anthony Yarde could have fought for a vacant belt. See, he still would have had his guaranteed shot after taking, I guess, millions to step aside. So I know hindsight's 2020, and I understand the ambition and the self-belief that Anthony Yarde had going into that Sergey Kovalev fight, but really he should have learned from it at this stage in terms of that business move that he didn't make. He didn't take the step-aside money. If the opportunity arises here for him to step aside rather than take his mandatory shot against Beterbiev next, again, I would urge him, not that he watches my videos, but I would urge him to take that step-aside money, because you're still going to get your shot. What are you in a rush for? Let Beterbiev fight again, maybe get damaged. Do you know what I mean? Maybe the title swap hands and you've got a better chance potentially against Dmitry Bivol than you have against Beterbiev. I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm just talking about possibilities here. Okay? So if I was advising Anthony Yarde officially, I would definitely be telling him, if these guys offer you step aside, take the step aside. You're still going to get your shot anyway. and you're going to get paid a lot of money for just, sitting around and studying and maybe watching Beterbiev or Bivol take some damage. You know what I mean? So with my manager's hat on, that's what I'll be doing. But of course, with my fan hat on as a boxing fan, forget about the Anthony Yarde mandatory shot against Artur Beterbiev. I want to see the Undisputed fight. That's with my fan hat on. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below about Artur Beterbiev saying he prefers the Dimitri Bivol Undisputed unification over the Anthony Yarde fight next. And let me know what you think the chances are of the Undisputed fight happening next rather than the Yarde fight. And if the Yarde fight does happen next, how do you see it going? Do you think Anthony Yarde can do better against Artur Beterbiev than he did against Sergey Kovalev? Anthony Yarde didn't talk much at the time about some of the issues that he encountered in Russia when he went over to fight Kovalev. But since then, he has opened up a little bit more and said certain things were happening behind the scenes that were potentially designed to unsettle him. And I guess that's to be expected. It shouldn't be the case, right? It's not fair play, but this is what goes on in boxing. This is why you need a strong team behind you. This is why it's not always ideal to go over to these backwaters like Chelyabinsk in Russia and take on the champion, because this is not standard boxing territory. Do you know what I mean? So if they've got a local favorite out there, a local star, a local hero, it could be even more dicey there than, let's say, fighting a native of Las Vegas in Las Vegas. But trust me, all kind of shenanigans go on in Las Vegas too. I'm just saying, when you're going to a backwater, there's even greater potential for funny business and more extreme types of funny business. Anyway, like I say, let me know what you guys think about this whole situation in the comments below. How would Yarde do against Beterbiev? How would their styles match up? And they're talking about Beterbiev going over to the UK to face Anthony Yarde at the O2 Arena in London. I thought I heard someone say a stadium fight like Arsenal or something, which sounds completely unrealistic to me. Yarde doesn't have that kind of following in the UK. Yes, he has the Adidas sponsorship deal and he's done very well for himself, but he's not on the level of, I don't know, an Anthony Joshua or even a Dylan White. Probably not even a Derek Chisora in terms of how well known he is to the UK public. So an O2 fight, yeah, but I would have thought it more realistic for Anthony Yarde to actually be going over to Canada to face Beterbiev there, which is Beterbiev's second home, or even the United States. Will the fight really make more money in the UK? Maybe it will. Maybe I'm underestimating exactly how well-known Anthony Yarde is, but like I say, he's certainly not as well-known as an AJ or a Dylan White or anybody like that. A Tyson Fury, of course, in Britain. Is he even as well-known as Conor Benn in the UK? Has Anthony Yarde ever sold out the O2 before? I don't think he has he? Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about all the points I've raised in this video. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high-quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, it's decentralized, and it's 100% censorship-free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment. You can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.